An American literary agent seeks to share Korea's literary works with readers in the West, and on Issues and Insiders today, we have the pleasure of speaking with her in person. Hope your work week is off to a good start. You're watching Issues and Insiders. I'm Min Sunhee. Now, earlier this year, I had the pleasure of connecting live with a literary agent based in the US to speak about her efforts to take Korean books beyond their borders to a wider audience in the West. Well, today I have her joining me here in the studio for more on her thoughts about K-books, if you will. Barbara, it's a pleasure to meet you finally here in person. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Right, Barbara, let's begin first with a self-introduction, including also your reason for this latest visit to Korea.
My introduction is I'm a literary agent based in New York City, and I specialize in Korean books, and it just happened that way. I didn't look for it, but I discovered several Korean books about 10 years ago. The Vegetarian by Hong Kong, the Please Look After Mom. The first book that I had sold in the world was Young Ha Kim, I Have the Right to Destroy Myself, and at the time, no one heard of Korean books. No one heard anything about Korea. It was before Parasite or Squid Games or K-drama or pachinko or anything, and I was very intrigued, excited by new voices, new stories, and so I introduced these books to the world, and the rest is kind of history because now everyone has Korean books, everyone loves Korean books, and I also think that during COVID and during this period, a lot of people were sitting home and watching K-dramas, and they began to be more interested in Korea, Korean culture, BTS, Blackpink, Korean fashion, and so people started reading more Korean books, I think, and that I saw a big rise, a lot of agents, a lot of publishers. Before it was only me, myself, and I. Now it's like everyone. Now, the reason that I came specifically for this trip was because I was invited to a very special event in Korea by Mrs. Sunju Kim, from the CEO and owner of MCM.
So, Barbara, you've promoted well over 40 Korean writers and their books in the West. What would you say is the appeal of Korea's literary works?
I think that, first of all, when I started, and even now, most people in the West had never heard of Korea, and they had never read Korean literature. There are Korean American writers, and that's a big difference. Like in America, people think pachinko, and Min Sunhee is a Korean writer, but she is Korean American writer, and she was educated in America. I mean, she's Korean. Lisa C. There are other authors who are Korean Americans, but they have a very different voice than Korean authors from Korea who are writing in Korean language and then are translated. So I think that when I started, no one had ever read this literature and these words and sentences, and no one heard the voice of Korean writers. And so that was very exciting. And I think that the Korean story, the authors, are very international, and they were writing about themes and ideas, family, struggle. I mean, the themes that Shakespeare writes about: love, war, family, revenge, the classic themes of life and literature, but they were writing them with a new perspective and a different angle. And so I think that that was very exciting for global readers. Then what happened was that Korean film and Korean TV and Hallyu and K-pop and BTS started exploding in the global scene, because I started selling and promoting Korean literature before any of that, before Parasite, before BTS. So I saw the effect of Parasite, which was huge. And when the film was shown with subtitles, it was really it was an amazing moment. And when the director talked about, I'm not dubbing this film, it's going to be with subtitles, and people went to theaters and they see it on television with subtitles. So it became, oh, great, I'm going to read Korean books, and subtitles are fine. And I think that Parasite, Squid Games then, Pachinko also was a big effect, and K-dramas. Everyone started falling in love with Korean content, Korean sensibility, Korean food, and then that sprinkled onto the Korean books.
And you mentioned earlier that the first writer you signed on was Kim Young-ha Kim.
Yes.
And the book was called, I believe, I Have the Right to Destroy Myself.
Right.
A very catchy title, I have to say. What was it about that particular book that caught your attention?
It was the title. Because I heard about the title and I said, oh my God, I have the right to destroy myself. I mean, I thought of it as, it just spoke to me immediately. And what happened was I spoke to him on the phone and he spoke English. So we had a great conversation and I sold the book to an American editor named Jenna Johnson, who was working at, I think it was Harcourt at the time, one of the best literary publishers. And I sold it rather quickly, and everyone in Korea could not believe it. They just couldn't believe it. And I'm, okay, great, so what else? And then I think definitely the book that broke everything out and opened the window, the doors, it shattered the glass ceiling, I would say, was Kyung-Suk Shin's Please Look After Mom. And when that book
was that the second book?
Yes, that was the second book I sold, although I had started representing many other books, for instance, The Vegetarian, Hayoung Pyeon, The Whole. And I loved these books, but no one was ready to buy them. But with Please Look After Mom, it was a book that really, it was a classic book that spoke to everyone, and it sold in about 37 countries. And it was published by, it was bought by Knopf, which is one of the most famous mainstream big American publishers. And the story of a mother missing and the children was so universal and classic that everyone absolutely went crazy and fell in love with the book. And then they started thinking that, oh, Korean literature, well, what is Korean literature? Because this was a story about a mother that everyone could read in Slovenia, in Germany, in Italy. So I think international publishers started having a more open mind about what Korean literature was. And I think then people thought, well, there's Please Look After Mom, and like that's the big Korean book, there's one. But I said, no. There's Zhang Yu Zhang, and there's thrillers, and there's philosophy books, and there's The Hen Who Dreamed She Could Fly, which is Sunmi Wang. And I started getting very excited about discovering other kinds of authors, not just literary, because I started with very literary books. And then I said, well, are there thrillers in Korea? I personally love thrillers. So I began to represent Eun-Soo Kim, Zhang Yu Zhang I met, So Mi-ae, and well, I read The Good Son, which was absolutely a breakout landmark book. And I've sold 3 of her books now all over the world. And she, in a sense, redefines how to write a thriller. And I think that the Americans and the Europeans were attracted, especially to thrillers, because a lot of the thriller writers because they talked to me and I asked them, were very influenced by Stephen King and by American authors that they read when they went to school. So their books are accessible in terms of a story or a structure, but they have their own very, very unique way of writing.
Staying with thrillers, would you say that Pyeonhae-young's The Whole is a thriller then?
Well, I would say that The Whole is horror, is a literary horror book. And I've been thinking a lot about this recently because I think that horror is the new trend in the world, I believe. And this is what I am working on and promoting in a big way. The Whole is a story about a man who is in a terrible car accident with his wife, and his wife dies. And he is in traction and almost dies. He's in the hospital. And his mother-in-law is taking care of him. And his mother-in-law, who her daughter died, of course, is very upset. He doesn't know, but the reader knows that he was very unfaithful and cheated on his wife a lot. And the only thing that his wife really loved was her garden. And she was very unhappy. And he doesn't know that the mother-in-law knows that he was cheating on his wife, but the mother-in-law knows. And she begins to isolate him from all his friends. She tells them, no, don't come to visit him in the hospital. And then she takes him to their home, to his home, to recuperate. She takes the telephone out, and he's totally isolated. And he's in traction, he's getting better, and there's a huge picture window outside his bedroom, and it's the garden that his wife loved, and his mother-in-law is digging holes in the garden, and they're getting bigger and bigger. And so I would say the book is, in a sense, reminds you a bit of Misery by Stephen King. And it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's a very short book. It's very powerful. It's very creepy, and it's very suspenseful. I believe that the film will go into production in Korea in January.
Right, I see. Barbara, another author you worked with is Dolgi Min, and his debut novel is, like you said, Walking Practice. Could you tell us a bit more about it? Like I told you earlier, before we started our talk show, I'm very curious about this particular writer because he appears in the media wearing a mask, and he also uses a pen name, right? Dolgi Min.
Yes, yes.
Tell us a bit about him.
Okay, Dolgi is... he's a very brilliant writer with an incredible imagination, and it comes from a very deep place in him. And I think that he was someone who had to hide who he was as a child and as an adult and led a dual life. And he wrote this book, which is kind of an adult fairy tale, if you will, almost. It's about an alien who comes from outer space and crashes on Earth. And in order to feed itself, it has to hunt for humans. And it uses Tinder for dating sites to hook up with people. It's a black comedy. It's very funny, the book. So people can read it in many different ways. I don't want to just do a book on a topic because it's popular. I want to do a book on a topic, but it has to be a book that's brilliant, I think. So a young translator had discovered Dolgi's book and was translating it for, I think, for her master's in literary translation in America. And she wanted to work with me, so she sent me a sample of 5 pages of the book. And it was a time when I didn't have many books that there was nothing exciting happening. I thought, well, I don't know, there are no more books that interest me. I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I should stop. And then I got 5 pages of Dolgi Min's book, and I went to the moon. I just flipped out. I thought, this is absolutely brilliant. It's so exciting. Here I am. I'm back again. So So his book was the first book that a Korean book that I sold, and it was published in English before I sold it in Korea.
That's remarkable.
Is it? And it's a testament to him.
Right.
First time I'm announcing this, is that I have sold the option to Dolke's book to Dakota Johnson's Hollywood film company, Tea Time Pictures, and it's going to be a movie.
Barbara, if I were to ask you to identify perhaps a common factor among the books that you choose to sign on to promote in the West, what would that factor be, briefly speaking?
Well, I call it the X factor.
Explain.
It's my X factor. It has to be, first of all, I really like brilliant writing. I like excellent writing. So I think that the authors that I work with are pretty much brilliant writers. If they're commercial, sometimes I'll take on a commercial book, but for the most part, the authors, Ha-young Pyun, Shin, Zhang-yu Zhang, J.M. Lee, they're brilliant writers, and their ideas. And I think a book has to speak to me. I have to feel this is the most exciting book, and if I sit down and I start reading it and I don't leave my chair until it's finished, I know and I can tell very early on the writing, the tone, the story. So I don't have readers. I only listen to myself. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care how many copies a book has sold. If a book sells 2 million copies, it doesn't matter. If I don't think it's great, it's like it's not for me. If a book has never even been published in Korea, like Dolke Min, I thought it was brilliant. It's like, it just is, I have to represent this book. So I feel also that I look for books that have universality to them. I'm very interested in, a book has to have a reason for being written. So I feel that I'm not just interested in a genre book like a thriller or a mystery or a commercial women's fiction just for entertainment. I want the books that speak to me are about something, and the author is saying something about life, about politics, about the world. If I read a book and I think it's beautiful and it needs help, and I know, okay, it's like it's a cause. Like I feel that I am helping the book and I'm helping the world.
Finally then, on that note, Barbara, what image of Korea do you suppose is generated in the West through the books that you represent?
Oh, what image of Korea is generated?
Right, in the West, through the books that you've selected.
I think that they generate, first of all, literarily speaking, a great excitement because they're very fresh and they're very new, especially the thrillers. And, you know, writers like Pyun, some of these literary horror writers, they are new. So they make us see literature in a new way that we've never seen before. So just speaking in the craft of writing and the way a story is told, it's a new way of telling a story from different points of view. I think Korean books very often, and Zhang-yu Zhang does this, or it's not uncommon in Korea for animals to speak, for there to be a main character of an animal speaking, which is very unusual than most commercial American or European books. That's maybe a children's
Animal
book.
Farm.
Right.
An old book could be
a very old book,
right.
or children's books. But so the way of storytelling, also books like, there are no books like adult fables in the West. And adult fables, through reading adult fables, which are common here, I think that they show a humanity. So aside from the exciting and the new, the fresh, the new voice, it's like style, fashion. Aside from that, I think that a lot of the Korean books that I handle and a lot of the Korean books reflect family. and the
A
beauty,
universal value then.
which is totally universal. And it's also, it makes you, I think in the West now, a lot of times, people are very isolated from each other, and families are not cohesive, and people don't think of families or family dinners or the way people here do, or the way people eat here. In America, you eat on the run, you're eating on the subway, you're eating in the kitchen. Families don't get together anymore. There's no Sunday dinner. And so these books help us in the West to remember that the beauty of families, the strength of families, the bond of people working together. And I think that it's a very positive, very beautiful, positive effect, and that's why people love them.
Well, what you're doing is also very positive for Korean writers here. All right, Barbara, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this edition. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Oh, thank you so much. 감사합니다.
감사합니다. Right, well, on that note, we end this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. Do join us again same time tomorrow.